And that brings us around to our feature speaker, Dwight. And Dwight is online someplace. I lost the picture of him. He's probably getting set up with his headset and microphone. Let me give a little bit of background on this because, and Dwight will continue on, but this is a project that was donated to us by the Vancouver Air Museum. It was donated to the chapter about 3 years ago. Dwight purchased this project from the chapter and decided that he was going to, venture down the path of putting this Yamaha Apex engine in. Now, so this presentation actually is going to have two parts, and Dwight and I have kind of worked on it together a little bit. The first part of it is going to be a little bit of an overview of the Apex. We've got some video about the Apex and the gear reduction unit, and then the second part of it is going to be how this thing was fit onto the 701. And with that, I'm going to pass the baton over to Dwight. Dwight, you with me?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay,
so,
and since I'm running the slides, you just tell me when to go to next.
Okie dokie. So next. So I built the Sonics, and when I was searching for an airplane to build, I got into this game late in life at 60 years old. And one day my wife I asked her, my life's kind of boring, need something to do. So she looked at me with her big, beautiful smile and said, no, not that big. She said, well, why don't you fly? And I didn't want to ask her. I thought maybe I heard her wrong. So I acquired a little CA2 or whatever and started flying. But when I was looking for airplanes that I wanted to build, I wanted the Zenith 701. But at that time, they were having engine cooling issues. And my first thing was, I need to buy an airplane that's designed for an engine that I can afford. And a Volkswagen engine was that engine. So the 701 wasn't cooling that engine well enough at that time, plus it's heavy. So I went with the Sonics, and then Volkswagen and blah, blah, blah. I've had all kinds of problems there. Well, when this came up in the chapter as being available, Ernie told me about it, and I thought to myself, no, you have to do this. So I went ahead and bought the project, not sure what I was going to do with it. It happened so fast, I just knew I had to have it. So I've been blundering ahead on it, and have sort of slowed down during the virus, but I like the fact that it looks like an airplane, but it's actually more of an ultralight. So that's why I acquired it. I like the fact that it's a STOL, and you can take two people in it. And basically the kit it was somewhat the same as the Sonics. The Sonics that I got was not match hole drilled. You had to do a lot of drilling and locating the parts. And same with this one here. You had to make things fit. I think on some of the newer kits, they make it too easy, so you don't develop the skills you need to build. So that's how we got it right there. And notice one wing, the rear spar is sort of together and the ribs are sort of fastened to it. So it was a big, giant, floppy thing when I got it. Yeah, good job, Mike. And but it was on the landing gear, and so I got it like that. I was pretty excited about it. I thought I was living large when I got this home. Next.
The next two slides are going to be a little overview of the engine. So I'm just giving you a warning, Dwight. You probably haven't seen this.
You want to buy an engine and a setup like this that doesn't cost you an arm and a leg? I'm Dan Johnson, talking with Teal Jenkins from Skytrack, who is going to tell me a little bit about the engine first, and then we will the shiny parts here, and we'll have some other ones in a different color. But before we get to the gearbox, tell me a little bit about the engine.
Okay, this engine is out of a Yamaha snowmobile. This particular model is the Apex. This is the fuel-injected version, so this is from years 2006 all the way up to 2018. and Yamaha used it for all those years. 4-cylinder, double overhead cam. It's got 5 valves, 3 intakes, 2 exhausts. It's a little bit higher RPM engine, so we have to really reduce the RPM to get it to the prop.
Why would somebody go that route, though? Why do this when you could buy an engine from an airplane company that already has everything all worked out?
Well, part of it is just the raw cost of the engine. You can get one of these engines from a snowmobile, from a wrecking yard or something like that, from anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000 just for the base engine, and then go ahead and take it out of the snowmobile and buy the redrive from me, and less than $7,000, and you got 150 horsepower.
Whoa.
So it's more just more of the builder that wants to be more hands-on. There is a company in Norway, Edge Performance, that is offering a complete engine package in the naturally aspirated and the turbo, and Skytrax is supplying them with the gearboxes for them.
Now the Edge Performance, these are the same fellows in, I believe, in Norway that do the add-on parts, if you want to call it that, for a Rotax engine.
Yeah, all the Rotax 912 upgrades.
They got some history to them.
Yeah, they do some really high quality. If somebody wanted a turnkey engine, they can buy a turnkey engine from them, and with my gearbox. And the price range getting it from Edge is more closer to the new 912 prices, but you're getting a 150 horsepower engine as opposed to, you know, 100 horsepower, 115 horsepower engine.
Yeah, okay.
And the power to weight ratio, this whole package, the way it sits with fluid and everything, is about 165 to 175 pounds. This is pure liquid cooled. It does have a oil heat exchanger that uses the coolant to cool the oil, but no air cooling as far as the block itself. It uses a radiator. So it's just like a modern, Japanese car engine, basically. The only thing that I've changed here is this particular exhaust right here is off of a motorcycle. It's a GSXR 1000 Suzuki motorcycle header and a motorcycle muffler. Now, what I do is these little stubs right here, these stub adapters actually make it so it bolts right up. So I make these little stub adapters.
Okay, you're doing this part, and the rest is just the way you bought it from a motorcycle guy or whatever.
Yep, yep.
All right, so if you're pretty handy then, mechanically adept, probably enough to assemble an airplane kit, would that be good enough to do this kind of work?
I would think so. A lot of the builders, if you could weld, yeah. And right now there's a lot of people coming on board that's offering the different components and pieces too. If you go online on the Yamaha Aircraft Conversions Facebook group, there's guys on there that offer the individual, hey, if you want headers, I'm making 10 of them,
Is that right? Okay.
So people are, with their expertise, are offering the, individual parts and pieces. I focus strictly on manufacturing the gearbox and sticking there, and other people can kind of go towards making the different parts and pieces.
These are the same exact parts, just with a different finish.
Right, yeah. It's black anodized as opposed to silver anodized.
Okay. And so when you get this engine, it wasn't intended for a prop, obviously, so you've got to do some reduction here to apply the engine speed to proper prop speed.
Absolutely, yes.
Walk me through the process of what you created.
So this is the back half of the gearbox. Basically, whenever you get the snowmobile engine, there's a cover that's mounted on the engine. You pull the cover off, and then you mount the back half of the gearbox. And this here is basically a replica of the cover that you take off, including the internal baffling.
Okay. All this, the shiny parts that I'm looking at here on this otherwise black thing.
Yeah, that's basically a replica of the cover that you pull off. So you pull the cover off and you bolt this on through the perimeter bolts on the cover, and then there's an 8mm bolt here that bolts it to the head also. So you get the back half on, install the gears, and the front half on. And then once you install the front half on, you're basically done. You can bolt the propeller on it. So a builder in the matter of hour and a half, 2 hours time frame can adapt, put a prop on his engine.
Wow.
And so
now that has nothing to do with the rest of the engine prep time. But once that's done, he gets this from you, and he's got an hour and a half of work left.
Right. Yep. And then there's like I was mentioning a little bit ago about the individuals online that are offering their parts and pieces. There's a guy online on the Yamaha Aircraft Conversions group. His name is Ian Bange. He offers the wire harness, plug and play wire harnesses. Okay. So you could take your stock wire harness from your snowmobile and send it to him, and he'll go through it and make it, take off all the grip heater and the headlight stuff, you know, out of the wire harness, send it back to you, and then you got a plug and play harness and you can just plug everything in.
All right, so actually quite a bit of support to do what sounded like, okay, that's more than I would tackle. Maybe not, because there are other people to help beside you.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So it's kind of like a team effort amongst the builders. We all, you know, try to fulfill our niche in the industry, and you know, everybody takes care of what they're experts in. But yeah, I supply the gearboxes to Edge Performance for his adaptation of the Yamaha engine.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about, you know, everybody knows on a Rotax or lots of other things, aircraft that use a gear reduction. They know a number or something like that. Give me some of that information about gear drives, and then I want to hear about how you keep it cool in there too.
Okay. So the gear reduction in this is 3.11 to 1. So that's this reduction. Yamaha, the engine itself, has a reduction on it, which is 1.23 to 1. So compounded from crankshaft to prop, it's 3.83 to 1.
Almost 4 to 1 then. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. So so for cooling, we do have some fins on the cover here. If you turn it around, there's some cooling fins here, and also I've incorporated an oil reservoir in here with separation baffles in here, so the oil collects in this area. It spins off the gears and collects and cools as it circulates. So
I see, okay. What is the engine typically running at RPM?
Well, cruise power setting in something like this is anywhere from 6,000 to 7,000 RPM.
Okay, so pretty high RPM, higher even than a Rotax.
Yes.
And that's why you need the 4 to 1 reduction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, I want to give you guys a little bit of history about this engine. So the RX-1 was launched in 2002 as Yamaha's first 4-stroke snowmobile. It was a 998cc liquid-cooled 4-stroke double overhead cam inline 4-cylinder with 5 valves per cylinder. The base motor was originally from the Supersport motorcycle, the YZF R1, the R1 race bike. It has the same pistons, connecting rods, and intake and exhaust cam and valve system as the R1. In contrast, the crankshaft, cylinder head, lubrication system, which is a dry sump, the cooling system, and the reduction gear shaft and other parts were redesigned specifically for the snowmobile application. So in 2006, the engine underwent its next evolution to the Apex model, gaining a fuel injection and a much lighter crankshaft design, reducing the weight by 1 kilogram, and that also helped achieve linear response and improved acceleration. They did one more evolution in 2011 with a new exhaust layout and the addition of the exhaust ultimate power valve, or also known as the XUP. In addition, they added a knock control and a new intake funnel design, increasing the power by about 5 horsepower. The Apex snowmobile engine has been voted one of the top 10 best snowmobile engines of all time. So looking at the options of engines that you can use to adapt to our specific application, the reliability and the history of an engine is probably the first place to look. I personally chose this engine because of the history it has, the design, the power to weight ratio, fuel consumption, and the fact that there is a gearbox that is specifically designed for the Apex engine by Skytrax, or more specifically by Teal Jenkins. Having the ability to have a off-the-shelf gearbox is really the key element when adapting any engine to an aircraft application. We've seen other solutions used to come up with a gear reduction system using adapters to Rotax C gearboxes on the RX-1 version of the engine, some one-off designs, but having a really robust and proven and tested design from Skytrax really made this engine that much more attractive. Furthermore, the design in itself, if you go back to the motorcycle design, is really designed for 200 horsepower. Now there are different parts on this engine, and the horsepower output from the original RX-1 is about 140 to 150 horsepower, but the capability of boosting it up to 200 horsepower and remaining inside the original design of the motorcycle engine also made it another key feature of the engine that I liked. We could boost the power and not exceed the design. Now, of course, with the application of a turbo, it is possible to boost this engine up to as much as 400 horsepower in sled applications. We haven't seen that yet in an airplane application, but there has been upwards of 300 horsepower put through this engine. So the potential's there. The way we have it set up, it should be right around 150 to 160 horse, and I think that's going to be more than enough for a Kit Fox, which is designed for 100 horsepower. So there's gobs of horsepower, low fuel burn, lightweight. It just makes this engine really the top choice for me when I was building this project. The community that's involved with this engine has also been extremely supportive. My thanks to Brian Dacus, Ken Brown, the Yamaha aircraft conversion page, and everybody who's involved there. The support and ideas that go into making this a viable option for airplanes is really great. So I recommend that you guys all jump in on the Facebook page, read through all the history of the posts, and get as much information about this engine as you can if you're looking at it as an option.
Okay, let's see. This is what it looks like done. I can't believe it, but I fabricated that motor mount. I have a welder friend of mine. I was trying to figure out how to do it because, you've got this big heavy thing sticking out in space, and how do you orient it to the airplane and physically connect it to the firewall with nothing to start with. So next. So there it is with the oil tank. That I also kind of designed that, and it fits pretty well, and later I'll explain a little bit more about that, how I came up with that. But next, so I've got the Skytrax gear reduction as well, and with that drive on the engine with no exhaust, that thing weighs exactly 150 pounds with the drive and the motor with no exhaust. I was really, really impressed with that. Next. So, all these little fasteners on the firewall that the motor mount connects to, I started off fabricating those, got those to where I could fasten them to the firewall. Next. And this is just a picture of the insides. I finally fitted the windshield and made a beanie, and the seats were in it. I had to pull them out so I could work under it. That was no fun. And I fabricated the dashboard there. I haven't drilled any holes for instruments, but that's where it is. Next. And there it sits, much before the windshield. The doors, oh my goodness, making those doors was, anybody that's done that sort of thing knows what you went through. So on the firewall, you can see on the top center the piece that I fabricated there. That's when I was first getting a relationship with my welder. Had him weld that up, and the two on the bottom. There's 5 points of contact on the firewall. Next. So just a picture from the inside with the doors open, and I left the coating on the windows to keep things from getting scratched up. Next. And luggage compartment, just so happens it's a nice storage locker. Next. And yeah, that's the motor mount. And on the top right there, you can see the water overflow thing. I'll talk about that a little bit later. And on top of the exhaust is what I believe is a voltage regulator. And I did the Ian Bang thing. I sent my wiring harness off to him and had him redo all the wiring. I haven't started hooking it up yet. I haven't gotten that far. It kind of slowed down because I've been working on another project. Next. So when I first did this, it would be good to be able to get the oil filter off. So when I fabricated the two tubes, the two main tubes that the engine connects to, I bolted it all up and I remove the oil filter just to make sure I could. Next. And same picture. And then on the top right there, back one, you can see the water fill tank and then the overflow tank next to it. So again, like with the engine, all this stuff is hanging out there. Where do you put it? So these pieces, I just held them up where I thought they should go, and then made brackets to make them sit where I wanted them to sit. And it's amazing what you can do if you just look at it and noodle it for a while. Maybe this isn't the most elegant thing, but I wanted to build this airplane as inexpensively as I could. So I wanted to use the parts that came with the snowmobile if I could. So that's where a lot of this comes from, why it looks the way it does. Next. And so on the left here, you can see that mount says front on it. That's where the oil tank sits. And I haven't worked out exactly how I'm going to fasten the oil tank there, but on the bottom, that yellow thing is a piece of plastic that I had, a plastic channel that I had. So the thing sits on that, and the two little lips on the piece that says front on it. The tank mounts in there perfectly. Next. And more pictures of the bottom of the motor mount. Next. So that oil tank was interesting. On the left, the yellow pieces are my false starts. The left two are false starts for the oil tank. So I needed to make something that would fit in there. I wanted to use the original tank off the snowmobile, but its shape, I just could not figure out how to get it to fit in there. So I had to fabricate an oil tank. So the one that says front on it, that's the shape that worked. And what I did, it's odd. Well, you'll see later, it's an oddball shape. And I'll speak more about that. But anyway, so I made another one out of really thin aluminum just to show that I could. And then on the right is the tank that I came up with. And what I did, I figured the shape that I needed, and all the oddball shapes, I'm on the drawing paper, I made them into squares. And I figured out the area of the square and then divided it in half to find the area. And then I found out, or I did a little research and found out how many cubic inches there are in a quart. So the original tank, I filled up the original tank, and it's a 4-quart tank. So I needed to make the tank hold 4 quarts. And I also tried to make it so that the oil would hit the dipstick at the place that it did on the original snowmobile. And that was a bit of a challenge. So I made it, figured out how deep the tank had to be to make it so that 2.5 quarts hit the dipstick where it should hit. And then it was a matter of calculating how much taller the tank had to be to hold 4 quarts. So you can see the paper one fit in there just right. Yeah. And then to the right of the paper oil tank, you can see the air intake that I'm working on. Next. And if you look at it from the right, you can see that it fits in there pretty well. Next. And so here's the oil tank. It fits right in there. I haven't worked, any suggestions would be helpful. I'm trying to figure out how to fasten it in there. I can't use rubber because the oil gets too warm, I would think. So I'm still noodling how to fasten it in there. Next. That's the original oil tank, what it looked like. So the straight lines on it, you can see, I just marked those because I wanted to use the original connections for that oil tank and be able to use the original hoses so I would know where to get the hoses. So I cut it out, and this is what I ended up with, was these pieces right here. And there's that long tube in the middle is important, apparently, to get the air bubbles out of the return oil. So I wanted to make sure that was in the new tank. Next. Yeah, and there it is. And that's what it looked like before I cut it out. Next. And there's the tank. And I found a really good Corey Mickles, really good welder in Lebanon, just east of Lebanon, and he welded all this up for me. I made this out of 50,000s because 50,000s is what the original tank was made out of. And so he tacked it up. And next. And the on the snowmobiles, from what the research that I did, this piece right here has a wire mesh strainer in it that goes up into the tank. And apparently that's one of the points of contention with that engine is that strainer never gets cleaned. So I've seen two of those. I've seen two of those come out of the snowmobile engine, and both of them were like 80% clogged. I mean, they were just all gummed up. So this would, in my mind, would be a maintenance item that you'd need to check on your annual, would be to pull this out and clean it. And the way I designed the tank, it wouldn't quite go in all the way. So I had Corey, he made a little piece that goes in there that fills that gap. Next. So, and it's really hard to weld this thin aluminum, but I think Corey did a pretty good job on getting it. And all these pieces are, all the original hoses fit on this tank, and, which is, I think, is wonderful because you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you replace a hose. You just go buy one for that snowmobile. Next. Yep. And I guess I'm trying to point out the little piece of plastic that the oil tank sits on. Next. And there it is. Yeah, believe it or not, all those hoses fit. Hopefully there's a picture in here of them all fitting. Next. And there's the dipstick. I just, maybe I didn't hit the mark exactly, but I know I hit it pretty close. That way I don't have to reinvent the wheel trying to figure out the oil level. Next. So how did I position the engine? Well, I made a table, and the plans say it should have a 3-degree offset to the left. I think that's what the plans say. But anyway, so I made this table, and it just so happens this engine has 4 little tabs on the bottom of it that if it sits on those tabs, it's level. And and that proved to be extremely helpful. So first I made this table and measured the distance from the center of the hub to the floor, what it had to be according to the plans, marked it on the table, and you can see I marked the hub and the 3-degree line in the center. Next. Now I made this cradle that holds the engine, and the little hook on the left side, that little hook there thing, is just for a bungee cord, goes through that and onto the engine to hold it more to the engine. And at the center right on the bottom where it says hub, if you follow it back to the piece that goes up and down there, there is a nail that goes through there. And that makes it so that this piece will swivel on the table. And so I marked that piece down its center line, and then that's how I got the 3 degrees. Next. So, and then I put the mark back where I'm pointing at for the 3-degree offset. Next. And I can see there's the center. Next. There was the table. I had to, on the bottom there, I had to move that piece on the bottom because the nose wheel hit it. Best laid plans of mice and men. So I had to make it so it would get close enough to the firewall. I called Steve Henry and asking him about the plausibility of putting an Apex in a 701, and he said he didn't see any reason why not. But the only thing is, he said you need to mount it as close to the firewall as you can get it. So that's what I did. Next. So that's what it looks kind of like all put together. So I basically, yeah, next. So what am I trying to show there? Let's see. Oh, yeah, on the right there, an engine hoist, which I would prefer not to own it, but that's why I own it, was to put this engine on. And my Sonics just loves to utilize that engine hoist, as it turns out. Next. So I blocked the airplane up level. I leveled everything as best I could get it. And then I put the table in there, and the piece of wood behind the table, I cut it so that it would fit between the two uprights on the right side of that additional piece there. It just fits right between the metal uprights, but on the left and the right of the firewall, right there. It fits in there. It won't move left or right. So I marked the center line down it and made sure that line matched up with the center line on the table. And then I made sure everything was level with the level there. Next. Then I'm thinking, oh, how do I start this thing? Now what? Well, I ordered the tubing from Aircraft Spruce. I think I made that tubing you see there, I think is 1.25 inches. And I fabricated the 8 pieces that actually connect that tube to the motor. And I thought, well, okay, I'll just fasten all that stuff in and then see what happens next. And my welder friend, I use poster board for all kinds of stuff. I make everything, the baffling for my Sonics, all kinds of little pieces I make with poster board first. And I was telling my welder that because I said, how the heck do you figure out this motor mount? So he said, use poster board. And I go, what? Poster board? Okay, I guess. So then I went upstairs, and I love using stuff I got laying around. I had a bunch of old tent poles, and and I don't remember the size. The numbers, not my thing. I like to write. Computers remember stuff. I'm an idea man. Anyway, the tent poles were the exact same diameter as the steel I had for the motor mount. Aluminum's a lot easier to work with than steel. So I made the pieces for the motor mount out of aluminum. Next. So I had the motor sitting there positioned correctly, held in place with all kinds of bungee cords in the engine hoist and blah, 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 blah. And I had the 5 points of contact on the firewall, all had the steel connections that they needed. As you can see, some of them there. Next. And then this is the business end of the thing. That, of course, the hole saw I had wasn't the right size, so black tape sort of made up for the difference in circumference of the hub there. And you can see on the bottom the C, the center line, goes down the center line to the table and maintain that all the way back to the firewall. Next. So that's a good picture of the thing, everything hanging there. It's nice that Zenith put the little shelf on there so you could store stuff on the firewall there. Next. Okay. I know there's some pictures in here of the actual, what I did with the aluminum. We'll see them shortly.
They're a little bit later, yeah.
Okay, so, and I was actually quite shocked with how the motor mount came out. Next. All right, so we're just looking at the bottom, and there is room for that oil filter to come out, as I explained earlier. And I'm pointing at something there. Why am I pointing? I must be irrelevant. Next. This is what I did. So these aluminum pieces, all I did, swear to God, is I just laid them up there to where I wanted them to connect. And when I decided where to connect them, I wanted the greatest mechanical advantage on those pipes for the engine. I didn't want to have them short and have it wobbling. I felt if the longer they were, the longer the points of contact were, I'd have a more stable triangle. So I made the pieces out of aluminum, tent poles I had laying upstairs in my barn, got them to fit perfectly, and then I taped it all up on the engine and had the welder come over and look at it. And he goes, well, that looks great, but you got to make them out of steel. And I go, yeah, I know that. I just wanted to make sure that you like this. And he said, sure. So then I took the aluminum, wrapped poster board around it, took a dirty wrench, rubbed the ends of the poster board with the dirty wrench, because it's got oil and junk on it, pulled it apart, cut it along the dirty oil lines, slid that over the steel like that, marked the steel, cut the steel on those lines, put the piece up on the existing, you know, the motor mounts and those two tubes. And I had very little filing to do. I was just amazed how well it went. And then when I taped it all back together and the welder came, because I figured there had to be something I would need to do, and he comes and he goes, I can weld that right up. So he did. Next. So there we are on the bottom again. Fairly neat. Next. So another thing, so I got the oil tank sort of figured out, and then I wanted an intake, and I've seen all kinds of exotic things that people came up with online for the intake. And I thought to myself, gee whiz, you know, try to use what you got. You're trying to do this on a budget. And if you look at the top, this was the whole thing, how it came. The metal piece in there, I cut that off because you can see all the bumps in the piece that on my left hand there. That piece right there has all those bumps on it, and those transferred over to where that piece of metal is. So I said, I got to get rid of those bumps because I'm trying to get things to fit inside of a cowl. So I cut the thing in half. I figured out where I needed to cut it so that I could do that. And I ended up with this. I cut a ton off it. And so I came up with this and made little U-channel in there, riveted those on, and then riveted and sealed up the piece of metal that I put on there. And it took a good inch out of the height of it. Next. And that's the piece that's left over. And I measured that piece right there, that hole. That was the intake for the original snowmobile. It's 1 inch by 7 inches. And it's 1 inch by 7 inches. So I knew I needed that much intake area. So I did the pi r squared thing, and I knew I needed 7 square inches. 1 times 7 is 7. So I figured out, you know, I wanted to select what kind of air filter am I going to use. Next. So I cut that, I put it on there, and like all the hoses fit. All the original hoses fit on that. So I didn't have to reinvent the wheel figuring out what went where. So next. Yeah, you can see the nut plates. I haven't made the gasket yet for it. Next. I'm just looking there, it looks like. Next. And I was really happy with how it came out because I wanted that to go on there like that. I wanted the oil tank to go in there, and I didn't want a bunch of real estate taken up. I wanted to make it neat, but as inexpensively as I could. Next. So there you have it. Next. That's my dog on the right there. That's Missy. So this is what it looked like done. Next. It so happens that the Rotax 582, I was leaning toward that filter for that. But the 582 holes are 2 inch. And if you do the pi r squared thing, you don't end up with enough square inches to equal 7. So I found another air filter that was 2 1/4 inches, and that noodles out to over 7, just over 7 square inches of intake area. So I felt that turned out pretty well, and you know, it looks good. You know, only time will tell if it works, but I'm blundering ahead. Next. So I made the beanie for the top, and you know, Bill McClagan was saying that they made the beanie for theirs, whatever, and so I came up with this design, and I like it. It's simple. And next. So I made I did the template thing to capture the shape I wanted, and made 3 ribs, I guess you'd call them. And that's how I made the thing, the beanie. Next. That's what it looks like from the inside. The wings have been fitted to the airplane. So, yeah, that's it. Good job, Mike. Anyway, it was fun to make that. I mean, all this stuff, it's fun to make it. Next. So, this is the water management, the fill tank and the overflow tank. And then I'm pointing to the thermostat area. I think it's the thermostat. But anyway, I have that one and the one next to my middle finger. Those are the only two connections that go to the radiator. So I'm ready to shoot down to the radiator. That's where I am now. But it was fun making all those little brackets that hold those tanks on. And all I did was I held them up. I go, this needs to go here. And so the original tube to the left, that long tube that connects to the engine, up here, I'm pointing with my pencil here, thinking you can see my pencil. But right above the arrow, that tube right there is longer than stock. I put that on there to see, if that would help. And it did. It put it right where I needed it to go. And so I made brackets that held the tank in place. And I think they're pretty good. I mean, I like the positioning of them, and I got to use what I have. Next, I fitted the tail on it. That was fun. The tail was mostly made, and the horizontal stabilizer was mostly made, but none of the fitting was done, and the brackets for fitting them were not done. So that was quite a challenge to get all that right. The tail, it had been dropped on the tail when I got it. So this was all crunched up on the bottom there, and I was a little concerned about that. So, I usually stew about things for a couple of days before I do something. So I went out there one evening with a block of wood and just started bending stuff. And oh my goodness, it came out pretty good. So now I've got the rear ends all fitted and riveted together, and I've had the tail on it and the cables all hooked up and everything. Next. So not much to say about that. And now all the surfaces live in various cubby holes around my property. That's the tail done pretty much, and the horizontal stabilizer and elevator. There was a lot of fitting to go on in there to get that all to fit right. Next. Yep. That's my seldom used kayak in the back. And man, that little sander thing right there, my goodness, have I ever used the dickens out of that. Oh, I put another sander pad on it and whatever. Next.
And having visited with you, you made this all in a fairly cramped space, as you're going to see here. So you were very creative in how you use your space.
Yeah. And the piece right there, that is an important piece. So when I got the airplane, one of the things that aluminum, small, thin-skinned airplanes are famous for is oil canning. So a lot of the people, they'll put stiffeners in there, and Bill McClagan and the kids did that on the other one. They ran them from the top left to the top, or bottom left to the top right, long ways. Well, I did it a little bit different. I went down the side because in my thinking, I thought it would be better to have as short of a run of thin metal as possible. So if it's not structural, which it shouldn't be structural because it's not in the plans, I ran them sideways to get that distance down. So the piece I'm holding was integral to that project. I put that on the bottom of the airplane because you had to get inside. I put that on the bottom of the airplane and fastened it to the ceiling and blocked it up with sawhorses. And that allowed me to crawl inside without falling through the fuselage. It worked. And a person much bigger than me would not have been able to fit in there. So, thank you. My lovely wife just brought me coffee. But anyway, so that was the day I put those in, that was a big deal, putting those stiffeners in. So, next. And that's the elevator. So these are the wings. The wings live in the basement. So I had to do something that was really expensive on the airplane. I had to put something expensive on it. So I went to Van's Aircraft and bought some sheet aluminum. And I made the fuel tanks accessible. After my experience on Iran's S-14 trying to work on fuel tanks that were sealed inside the wings, I decided I had to have access to those fuel tanks. So I made these panels from Van's Aircraft aluminum and made it so I can get access to those fuel tanks. Those were all nut plated in. And this, you can see kind of how I did it. I put all the nut plates in there, and now I can get to the fuel tanks. So, and that also ensures that you won't have any problems with them. If you don't do this, then of course you'll have problems with them. So next. Yeah. Went together. So the wings, like I said, have been fitted on the airplane completely, but I don't have a big hanger so I can leave it together. So I had to take them all apart and whatever. So that's what it looks like with the covers off. That's what it looks like with the covers on. Next. And that's how it's sitting in the basement right now. I got my fuel senders in there. That was fun cutting those holes and getting all that together and not to leak. I was just terrified that those were going to leak. But I got them in there as best I could with the sealer and everything and filled up the tanks. And checked the fuel senders to make sure that they were, so I knew what a half a tank was and that sort of thing. I made this channel down the wings to shove electrical wires. And all it is CPVC. And the little bend there, you know, you Google that, you fill up CPVC with sand, heat it up, and you can bend it in any shape you want. So that's what I did there. Now I have a clear channel to the wingtips. And if you notice in these drawings, there's access holes everywhere. If there was something that needed to be worked on that I thought I would remotely need to get to in the future, I made an access panel to get there. So there's like 4 of them for each fuel tank. That's the root area, the leading edge. That's the dog. That's Missy. She likes to bark. Anyway, so of course that piece I made out of, guess what? Poster board several times. Yeah, there you go. And made it out of that, and then made it out of aluminum, and there you have it. And on the plans, you draw a little graph thing. That's what those lines are, and it sort of tells you, you graph it out, and it gives you something that's close, and then you refine it later to make it fit real well. Next. These are the inboard flaperons, and they're not fastened because I have to fit them to the fuselage. There's a bell crank at the root of the wing that goes there, and they have to pivot in the right place. So I've got to put those back on. They've been fitted on the wings, but I have not had them on the airplane with the wings on. So that's why they're not wrapped yet. Next. So this is the airplane with the wings on it, with the struts on it. And yeah, I was making motor noises by the time I got this far. Next.
Hey, Dwight, this does not show any Fowler flaps. I think you made a decision to. Right. So I did a little research, and Bill McClagan gave me a lot of documentation on the effectiveness of those Fowler flaps. And so from what I grabbed from that documentation and what I've read in other places, you can get the same result with VGs. And so they weigh 13 pounds, the Fowler flaps, all that stuff weighs 13 pounds. So I elected to have just a smooth leading edge, which I thought was easier to deal with. And if I can get the same result with just the VGs, why put the Fowler flaps on? So that's what I decided to do. And my brain just had a thing. Anyway, the things that go between, that hold the struts from flapping, those are all on. They're all fitted and drilled. Yeah, that was an interesting thing doing those. It looks like such a simple thing, but it's not. It's not. Next. And there's the wing root, a lot going on there.
and to get all that stuff to fit. I don't want to rivet the root pieces in until the wings are on the airplane because they're not up drilled yet. I wanted to leave a little bit of wiggle room for the holes. It's amazing if you don't up drill too soon. Keep it small as long as you can until you're ready to be done, and then up drill and rivet or bolt or whatever. I've learned that over the years. Yeah, I was really happy with the way those. Come on, what are those things called? Somebody tell me. No help, huh? All right. And making the struts.
Jury struts.
Huh?
Jury struts.
Jury struts. There we go. I knew there was a word for them. So yeah, the jury struts are fitted nicely, and I was really happy with how they came out. And the regular struts, you got to get the wings. There's a tolerance that they give you for the wings and all that. I measured all that and braced everything up, and then drilled the regular strut ends right there. And I guess the original ones, the ones that Bill had, didn't have the adjustment on the end like that. So they had to put them in. There was one rigid piece. And this one here, you could move the wing up and down and then drill. And so I was kind of lucky there, because the other ones, if you're off a little bit and they're twisted, that could really stink trying to get that to fit. So next, yeah. Got all that to fit really nicely. Lots of shavings underneath there. There's my pitot tubes coming out, pitot lines coming out. And I know, I saw something. There's one rivet underneath that, all that stuff. And I thought, gee, I can't get to that rivet. So every time I see a 701, I look at that rivet, and they're all missing. most of the ones, that one rivet underneath the part where it connects to the strut is missing. Next. I think it's funny anyway. Next. Yeah. So, yeah, if I had a bigger hanger, it sure would be nice to leave the thing together, but I don't have that. I have to wait for the weather to improve so I can put the wings back on it. And that's my barn / well house. And I'm looking at stuff there. That's just to prove I was there. Next. Yeah. Oh, so this is I got this stuff off the snowmobile, right? And you look at that and go, how the heck where do I put that? So you just hold it up there and look at it, and you go, okay, whatever. And then you come up with that. I go, yeah, it needs to go there. Put the tube on it. And then I go, well, how the heck do I connect it? Next. Well, I started making brackets, made a little shelf for it to sit on. It sat on really nicely. And I go, okay, now what? Next. Then I made the bracket there on the right there. And, it bolts up really nice. And the same with the overflow tank. It all just sort of fell together. Next. And on my Sonics, I did the same thing. Once you've carried wings around for a while, it just stinks when there's nothing to hold on to on the end. So I'm not going to build a wing without handholds. Next. Oops. Oh, I thought we had a picture of
okay. There's a picture, and you know what? I think I got it out of order. It is back. The wing handhold was back. Looking. Here it is.
Yeah, that's what it ended up looking like. And it sure makes moving them around a piece of cake. Okay, next.
Now we're at the end, and if you want to talk about this little project real quickly, we've got about 5 minutes. We can run this, and we'll be end of the meeting.
Okay. CA2, George Ginevro from Independence built it. I sold it to a guy 6 or 7 years ago, and he put a bunch of weight on it, changed the motor, and anyway, I reacquired it with the new motor on it. Of course, he added a bunch of stuff that made it real fat for part 103. I took most of it off. Anyway, it's part 103 right now. Ernie weighed it. Weighs 250 pounds exactly with no brakes. Now it has brakes on it. I'm sure I didn't add 4 pounds, but I'm going to weigh it again to make sure. And if it doesn't, I'll just change the battery out to a lighter battery, and I'm sure it'll make it. But it's a cool flying little airplane. It's part 103, truly part 103.
And we'll run this video, but I just want to point out, let's see, you have a Sonics under reconstruction, a CA2 construction, and a Zenith construction. So what
Yes,
are you
that's
flying?
very unfortunate.
What are you
The
flying,
Sonics
Dwight?
is flyable now. I mean, I've just been concentrating on this. The Sonics engine's back together, running. I'm not sure if I have a CHT GT problem yet because it hasn't been warm enough to get them warmed up. I've got to throw the cowl on it and make sure I don't have a problem. So,
All right, we'll go ahead and run this video then of the first flight.
So we're going to taxi test the CA2 and see how that goes, and check out my brakes and see how they work. But it's a really sweet looking little airplane, and so I made these brakes for it, and I fabricated all that and made the brake lever with the little swivel thing there. So we will see how this works. My plan is to fly the tail and see how that goes.
So just to start with, the video and the audio won't be synced. Don't know why. My software I'm using did that. This is a CA2. It was designed by Frank Griffiths. It was designed to be a Part 103 airplane with a Rotax 277 on it. This one has a Hearth F23 on it, 28 horsepower. And this little airplane with that F23 and electric start heavy battery weighs exactly 250 pounds. And that's what Frank's airplane, his original one, weighed. So I installed brakes on this one. You got to have brakes for taxiing around. So I put brakes on it after we weighed it at 250 pounds. I'm sure that I didn't install 4 pounds extra. I'm going to go ahead and reweigh it. But if it is over, which I don't think it will be, I can change the battery out for much battery will make the weight.
And this was just this last weekend, right? Or this week, wasn't it, Dwight?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was
2 days ago?
a couple days ago, yeah. The date was on the video there somewhere. My memory stinks these days. Every day's an adventure. So right now, I'm practicing turning to see how the left and right turning authority is, and using the newly installed brakes. The brakes seem to work really good. They're not going to skid the tires, but they're going to need to stop stop pretty quickly. Normally, I've got the idle low enough the brakes will fight. Turning left and right. Yeah, I'm talking about how well the brakes work. They work just like I wanted them to work. So now I want to taxi down the runway and make sure I can keep the airplane straight and bring the tail up and down to make sure that I got cruise control. Check out the here. You can see it's a little stiff on the side. It ended up going pretty well. The little airplane's pretty stable. So I'd flown it for 70 hours before this with the 377 on it. So it basically handled like it did before with a different engine.
Might be able to skip ahead here just a little bit. Oh, nope. Bad me.
I want to go hop, go down the runway and see how it flies a little bit off the ground, and then touch back down and make sure that it lands.
Yeah, direct crosswind.
Yeah, that was exciting. I was on one wheel for quite a while, quite a ways. I decided to go for it, and I took off. And when I poured the coals to it, 100%, it just leaped off the ground. It seemed like it just.
Hey, was that you? I thought I saw you like waving your hand to the audience.
Yeah, I was. Decided to go for it, and I took off.
Right there.
Poured the coals to it, 100%. It just leaped off the ground. It seemed like it just went up in a hurry, and it flew like a big giant maple leaf with a motor on it. Lots of fun. But those of us who are looking for really cheap flying and are looking for an inexpensive project and easy to build, I think this would be one of the better ones. Everything is flat. I didn't build this. However, I have built the Sonics and a Zenith 701. I think this would be great. And after having dealt with, everybody's got their hand out for money when you're flying light sport or better. If you just want to fly and have fun, I would think this is a real contender for something to do. I've had a blast with this thing. I flew it for 70 hours with a 377 on it, and then sold it, and then reacquired it, and took a bunch of stuff off it to get it down to the proper weight. The gentleman that had it before me changed the engine to the Hearth and put a bunch of other stuff on it, which gained the weight back, and took it all off, most of it, and got it down to the 103. And so far, it seems like it's going to be a blast to fly. So I think it's a good idea for those considering flying, but don't want to go through jumping all the, get the pilot's license, all that stuff. So those are my.
Great. Why don't we kind of open up the floor for questions for anybody who wants to ask Dwight anything about this particular project? And anybody questions?
Hey, Mike, this is Steve. Before we get into the questions, just wanted to have you take a peek at the chat. Brian Denna was looking for a contact to be able to work on the RV-12. Thanks.
I made a note on that for your. I made a note of that. Thanks. All right, somebody had a question.
I do. This is Deb. So on the 701, Dwight, in the engine, where do the fuel lines come in and attach to that kind of engine?
There's a fuel rail on the top, on the engine. It's fuel injected, and it comes in on that fuel rail. So you run it down from the wings. You have to have two lines going to the fuel tanks. I guess fuel injection has a return line, and you have to have that return line because and I don't know the technical reasons behind it, but it returns some fuel to the fuel tank. You have to have a place to put it. So, and you have to run it through fuel pumps, which I don't have that noodled out yet, but there's a lot of other people that do, and I'll be picking their brains for that. But, you know, I've figured out where I'm going to mount them and all that sort of thing. But it's pretty straightforward. Goes from the fuel tank to the fuel pumps, filters, and then to the fuel rail on the top.
I got a question on the CPVC. I think it's absolutely brilliant. I'm assuming you used conventional adhesive, and what diameter was that stuff?
I think that was 1/2-inch PVC, and I just used PVC cement. The part that's inside the wing is one piece. There's only one joint there that you can see. And the little metal strap, those are on every rib going down the rib, or maybe every other rib. I don't remember which. But what's that, PB 800 or something, that the white glue that's holding it to the bracket there? I put that in several places so the tubing would not move.
You can also use E6000 or Goop.
Yeah, 6,000. I think that's what it was.
Yeah, it's E6000.
Yep.
Something really sticky.
What other questions?
Hey, I don't have a question for you, Dwight, but I do have an electric fuel pump that you're welcome to have.
Oh, really? I will pick you up on that, Patrick.
Is it somehow? It's a 12-volt electric fuel pump, and I think it's 3/8.
Oh, but the way they do it, there's a thing. I know there's a Y connection. They put the filters and the fuel pump, two of them. They run two of them at a time, and there's a Y at one end and a Y at the other end. So they have a redundant setup for the fuel pumps. So I'm going to be using two filters and two fuel pumps. That much I know. So that probably would be helpful. I got to have two of them, and I'm going to go by what other people have used and that work. I'll be getting the part number and all that stuff. I have the information. I just haven't looked at it closely yet.
Okay, well, we'll talk offline.
All right.
Any more questions?
Oh, Patrick, are you flying your 701?
No, I'm still. It is repaired and going back together. I'm still fighting builder report. Okay, I'm still trying to build a header tank. I have about 8 of them stacked up in my hangar that have failed, and I'm going to try and weld one together this time. So we'll see what happens. See me in about a week, and I'll give you an update.
Okay.
I do want to mention that we, even though I forgot at the very beginning to record this, I have recorded Dwight's presentation, and when we publish it, I will include the second video that we skipped over today, which is a little bit of background on the Apex engine.
Oh, one more thing. Are we still there?
Yep, you're still there.
Okay, that engine, I got the engine from a guy named Jim Hensel. And that's what he does, is he disassembles snowmobiles. He's in Wisconsin or one of those cold states up there, and where they have lots of snowmobiles. He disassembles them and then sells the engine. I bought my engine. It worked out to about 100. It had about 150 hours on it. What I did is it had an hour meter, and they run their snowmobiles at about 30 miles an hour, whatever. We did the math, and it worked out to about 150 running hours on that engine. And I got the engine delivered here for $2,200, $2,200, which I thought was, you know, pretty cool. Came on a pallet. I picked it up at the Albany airport. The redrive I got from Skytrax, and it was $3,500. So there you go.
So when it's all said and done, you'll be into this engine for well below 10,000, 150 horsepower, 150-pound engine, correct? Is that a fair? Or you think it'll be more like 7,500, 8,000, or what do you think, Dwight?
No more than 8,000. The next big deal, of course, I got to fasten the oil tank in and a few other little things like that, but is the exhaust. And on the video that you just showed, the guy said he used this Suzuki ZX1000 exhaust, whatever. So
Gixxer 1000. Yep.
And you know, if the pipes line up, why not? I kind of like to use those flexible exhaust that came from the snowmobile that are on the engine now. I'd like to use those some way. And Charlie Kaiser, Brett Kaiser's the guy that did the motor mount welding, but Charlie Kaiser has a trike with the carbureted version of this engine on it. And they welded up an exhaust, but it's the exhaust is way too heavy, I think. But on his trike, it works just fine. I rode in that trike with that motor on it. The power was unbelievable.
Any other questions?
Hey, Dwight?
Yep.
On your CA2 for the weight, it sticks in my mind that part of the FAR says that if the equipment is, quote, equipment is removable, you know, easily removable like portable, it doesn't count on the final weigh-in. So how about using a drill battery for your starter?
Oh, I don't think it's necessary. That is so.
If it is necessary, what I'm saying is use a drill battery. You can take out, charge when you need it, and.
Oh, but I don't think it's broke. I think I can make the weight with just a lighter battery, and I'm done. And something when I had the 377 on it, it wasn't a hassle to start it. I just, you know, locked the brakes. I had hand brakes on it that I fabricated then that he took off, which whatever. Anyway, I would just lock the handbrake up and pull it. It was no big deal. And this also has a pull start on it. You can start it with a pull start, but it's got the battery and the starter on it. You sit in it, turn the key, and it goes like a real airplane. I mean, and it's part 103. You've got to be kidding.
So what you were suggesting is, I assume that you have a lead acid battery in there now, or an Odyssey, an AGM, and you could put a lithium and probably drop 10 pounds or so.
Oh yeah, yeah. And you know, I bet it makes the weight now, because what I added, I'm sure it doesn't weigh 4 pounds.
Great. Any other questions?
Yeah, is this being recorded so those of us that didn't get all of the meeting can get it later on?
Well, I turned on the recording just about a little. It was after the start. I literally forgot to do it. So yes, you'll be able to at least see all of Dwight's presentation.
Okay, thank you.
So that's the important part. All right. Anything else? Okay, Dwight, thank you for that wonderful presentation. That was awesome. I know a lot of people have been very curious about the Apex engine, and plus the idea of strapping an engine that's never been done before onto, you know, an airframe that, you know, many of us now know through the youth build. Yep. So we're going to draw this meeting to a close, and I think our next chapter meeting is February 13th. And again, a last, remember the Builders Week, the last week of January. Check it out on the EAA site. And also looking for articles and photos for the newsletter. And with that, thanks to everybody who attended. Thanks to everybody who contributed. And we'll look forward to seeing everybody next month then.